Hey there, Internet. Our Felix Finch here. And you know what? Welcome back to Underground Lucha Things. We're coming up to the season finale, and unlike most shows, this actually is a season finale. But before we do, we're doing this little special episode to kind of catch you up on the stories so far involved with this show. And like I said, this will be my first time watching it. So along with me to help me out on this lucha journey, I have the one, the only, coming in from Hawaii, Angie FN of Midcard Mana. Angie, how are you doing?
I am good. Thank you again for having me.
No,
Now, I know that I haven't been here from the very beginning, so some of the stuff at the very beginning, I know I didn't get to talk too much about, but we'll go through everything.
right, and we're just kind of covering the matches, covering things that led up to matches that'll be on this card. So
Main storylines, for sure.
Let's start off with Cage defeating the Mac. And with this is kind of an interesting thing because the Mac was brought in along with Killshot kind of as a pair of other heavies, cousins for Big Rick. So it was kind of cool to see the heavy also get a heavy of his own. And the reason these are clashing is we saw that once Big Rick hooked up with Arya Davari. Sorry, Delavar Davari. Have to remember he has a new name here. Once he hooked up with Delavar Davari, they had an opportunity at the Trios Championship, and while the Mac was prepared to have this championship opportunity, Cage instead decided to come into the locker room, layeth the smacketh down upon the Mac, and take that spot for himself. The two have had a couple. The two have had in run-ins during like the medallion match, or even their match prior to this, which ended so quickly after the Mac came out with a surprise roll-up that they continued fighting out of anger. That we have them doing a Falls Count Anywhere match because that's the most violent thing Dario could think of. And Dario, someone just got murdered on your show. I mean, there's more violent things you could think of, but hey, you know what? Solid start. Anything I missed or anything you wanted to cover there?
I think just very interesting how these are two guys that came at two very different points in the season. I'm just looking it up to double check, and Cage first appearing in episode 10 as part of that Fatal 4-Way, where we also get introduced, I believe, to Arhenis and Helico and Aerostar. And the Mac showing up as part of Big Rick's trios team in episode 21. So definitely we've had way more time to get to know, I think, Cage inside of the temple. We've seen a little bit more. He's definitely gotten more singles opportunities to compete, but I think that's what makes me going into this more interested in the Mac and getting to see how he chooses to prove himself now that he's getting more opportunities to show himself as a singles competitor instead of just as one of the backers of Big Rick.
Speaking of people that came in different time points, our trios match is going to be our inaugural trios champions who've been here since the beginning with Angelico, Ivelisse, and Son of Havoc taking on this new team, the Disciples of Death. And they're going to be battling for the Trios Championship. Listen, Angelico, Ivelisse, and Son of Havoc, they were put together by Dario as kind of because they were feuding, and that feud was really not showing any fruits for anybody's labor. But despite having the odds stacked against them, with the crew coming out as surprise entrants, despite having to face off with some of the biggest that Lucha Underground had to throw at them with Cage and King Cuerno and Hernandez, they've made it through. They've retained these titles. The Disciples of Death is kind of interesting because they were introduced to us in a backstage bit with Prince Puma, not Prince Puma, with Phoenix, where they start kind of showing some of the possibly supernatural abilities of Katrina. And it seems as we've gone on that they are definitely controlled by Katrina and aren't exactly Mills' henchmen specifically.
Yeah, definitely very clear, or I feel it's very clear that the Disciples of Death are definitely much more loyal, controlled by Katrina versus Mil Muertes. Mil Muertes is kind of his own entity, I kind of feel, who uses them or employs them, but doesn't necessarily really hand out marching orders in the same way. Interesting, and going back to Angelico, Ivelisse, and Son of Havoc, you know, Ivelisse and Angelico, or Ivelisse, sorry, and Son of Havoc, from the very first episode, we were introduced to the two of them, Angelico coming in at the same time as Cage in that Fatal 4-Way match in episode 10. So definitely these are three people that are super well established. We've been very fortunate, I feel, to get to see them develop as a trios team. And of course, I've spoken many, many times about how much I love the trios matches in Lucha Underground and how I love them as a trios team. So getting to see that storyline of theirs sort of grow and see how they slowly but surely become a real team and actually really bond with one another over winning and then of course defending those trios belts has been a lot of fun, especially knowing now what I didn't know about these three competitors back then.
For sure. And we also have on this card Hernandez taking on Drago. Again, Drago, somebody who's been here since pretty much the beginning. Very, at least visually, the most impressive luchador, I feel. Like, I think he has the best entrance gear. He has the best look overall, along with being incredibly flashy and just awesome. I love Drago, and he was banished for the temple from some time, but he is back. He is competing, and he'll be competing against Hernandez, who was brought in initially kind of as a babyface. He's been well known for his tag team. For his tag team prowess, but he gets to a chance to be a single star here, and he's felt like Drago's taken some opportunities away from him, and because in the last appearance he chokes out Drago with a belt from one of the believers in the audience, they're gonna have a Believers Backlash match where the Believers get to take leather belts and beat the luchadors when they get out of the ring. So a really interesting take on a lumberjack match. How do you feel about these two going face to face? And I believe this is set to be the main event of night one.
I think so. I think you're right about that. Drago has always been very larger than life and spectacular. Looking at these notes, Drago first appeared, I believe, in episode 3 and fought all the way up until episode 25, the Way of the Drago, where he lost in the title versus career match against Prince Puma. Hernandez, I want to say, came in a little bit before that. Episode 20 at another Prince Puma match where he's going up against Cage. So definitely Drago has had a lot more time to develop as a character. And of course, he, I think, was a lot less well-known to people watching, at least in the United States. So definitely really cool that he got that opportunity to make an impression. Whereas a lot more people were a little bit more, I guess, familiar with Hernandez, albeit in a tag team instead of as a singles competitor. But getting to see this different side, and especially as I've said several times in other episodes, that real heel shit from Hernandez. I was going to say Phoenix for some reason, but from Hernandez, I think this match has the potential, to me, and especially because of the inclusion of the Believers, and we've had discussions on whether or not it's going to actually be regular fans or if it's going to be hired extras or performers, as in people who are trained in professional wrestling. So we'll see what's going on, but that concept of a match to me has always and is already, even the second rewatch, so cool because it's so different that I think it has the potential to be one of the best matches in all of Ultima Lucha Nights 1 and 2.
Come on, Vinnie Mac. Let them bring... I don't know. If you watch NXT, apparently you can just slip brass knuckles in the Capitol Wrestling Center. So you never know what's available to you.
Yeah, I think the Collective had a show where the fans can bring the weapons.
Oh yeah, the fans bring the weapons is very popular. It's always very fun. Although you kind of, whoever brought the pizza cutter to SPW, F you. That was a terrible idea. You should feel bad about that. Yeah. Someone once brought a pizza cutter to a match.
That doesn't surprise me. People are insane.
Oh no!
Sorry.
The same thing as wrestlers used it.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert! It was sharp.
No.
Yeah, it was. Anyway. We've got on this card two I'd say of the top draws of this. Granted, neither of them holds a title in Lucha Underground, but I would definitely say they're the top draws. Mundo, who was introduced night 1, he was kind of the big surprise reveal for the main event to take on Prince Puma, who's since become the star, but he's taking on Alberto El Patron, who was brought in again as a great surprise. Like, I again did not realize that he had taken time between WWE. He ended up in Lucha Underground. I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, the two of them are going to be fighting. I mean, they've been jockeying for a position this entire time, and they seem to have some real personal heat. And look at the other as not good enough to face them. I think it's got potential to be some real artful stuff here.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of my perception of this match, and especially of Alberto Patron's run in Lucha Underground during this watching of it versus the first time I watched it, I know I'm definitely, or a lot of what I'm seeing now is definitely colored by the things that we've come to find out about him. So I've been trying to keep it separate, but it is to me very, very interesting how a lot of this build and his build in general in Lucha Underground has been him as the fan favorite kind of face. Even when he gets a little bit more violent or a little bit more cocky or arrogant or aggressive, there's still that tinge of face in how he speaks to and addresses the audience, which he does frequently, of course, that has made this sort of very bizarro when I'm looking back on it. Because I think a lot of the best work that he had done was heel work. And I think it fits him as a person, especially knowing, again, now what I did not know then. But definitely very interesting. I think also kind of works to have him be the sort of triumphant face. He is a little bit more of a luchador legend than Johnny Mundo is. So it makes a little bit more sense to play him off as the hero versus Mundo, who's sort of, even from the beginning when he was a face, always kind of had that sort of flashy, arrogant, kind of cocky style. So yeah, definitely very interesting build. And it's actually, to me, it's been very easy to forget that both these guys were also in WWE as I'm watching this.
Now, one of them is in WWE now, but let's get on to one of the one of the most fascinating matches, which is Pentagon Jr. taking on Vampiro. Now, again, Pentagon Jr. is another one that's been there a long time. Suddenly, midway through the season, he started just breaking people's arms for some mysterious master. We don't know what's happening there, but he's demanding that he battles Ian Hodgkinson, who, again, like I said, I had to look up. Well, I'm like, who the hell is Ian Hodgkinson? It's like, oh, no, Vampiro's, and Vampiro, like he stopped Pentagon from breaking Sexy Star's arm. He has gone face to face with Pentagon Jr., but refused to face him until penultima lucha, I believe, or the match before one of those two. He finally decides to face Vampiro on this show. So it's going to be fascinating because Vampiro hasn't been in the ring for like 10 years. And he's taking on someone who is, like, despite has a little time under them, but is still relatively new to the U.S. scene, whereas Vampiro is of legendary status at this point.
Definitely. I think this matchup, like you said, is probably the most intriguing, especially because as far as in the Lucha Underground universe, following this thread of storytelling, a lot of people maybe aren't as familiar with Vampiro. You know, they might have known the name, they might not. They might be at an age where, and this is going to sound, I'm going to sound so old for saying this, but they might simply be too young to have really gotten into watching matches that Vampiro had competed in earlier in his career. So they might be much less familiar. And I think that's what makes this so interesting, because you and I watching him, we're a little bit more familiar with Vampiro in ring than perhaps we are out of the ring. So getting to see the build-up for this match, and especially now that Pentagon Jr. is such a popular wrestler in today's world, in 2020, where we're living right now in a crazy time, it's almost as if this, even today, would be a dream match, and possibly even a bigger dream match that more people would be into than when they did it on Lucha Underground. Not saying that it wasn't cool then, but considering where both these guys are at now, I think the pop would be like blow the roof off of several buildings. Not saying that it should happen, because Vampiro, I worry about him. He is a talented man, but I worry about him. There's been a lot he's gone through. But yeah, I thought the build up to this match was so interesting because it relied, I felt, on knowledge that maybe most wrestler or most people, most audience members didn't quite have of Vampiro, maybe going into it. And if you did, if you're the big wrestling mark like a lot of us are, then you did, and it kind of enhanced it.
Also on this, we get a unique type of match, a unique type of title. One of the most interesting belts I've seen since, like I said, WMAC Masters. I showed you that, and that is much less of a time commitment. If we ever get around to doing that, it's much less of a time commitment. So this is the Gift of the Gods Championship, featuring Phoenix, Aerostar, Bengala, Big Rick, Jack Evans, King Cuerno, and Sexy Star. And instead of going towards everybody, we'll talk about a few things we know. Phoenix has been involved with Mil and Katrina for a long time. It looked for a while like Katrina was becoming Phoenix's valet, but she suddenly went back to Mil. I don't know. That's some real telenovela shiz there. Aerostar has always been impressive throughout this show. He's a very flashy luchador and had a great series with Drago. which he lost. So he got to keep his job. Again, still a weird one there. Big Rick has been here since the beginning. He was another surprise at the end of the first episode, and he's finally getting a chance to do something singles wise to kind of show that he's the big man on campus. Jack Evans is in here, and he doesn't show up as often as some of these other guys, but every time he does, it's hard to forget. It's easy to forget how good of a technical wrestler he is, despite his affinity for flying. King Cuerno has been one of the big bads since the beginning, has had a few shots at the Lucha Underground Championship, and with this Gift of the Gods, he'll have a chance at it as well. Sexy Star, again, here since the beginning, and she had to earn her medallion and then defend it on the spot against Marty the Moth. And then there's Bengala, who has been here for like 2 episodes, and Bengala ended up in a match where he got a shot at a medallion. So hey, good for you, Bengala. I can't say much about him, but this is a very fascinating thing where everybody earns a medallion. They put the medallions together in this belt, and this belt is like Money in the Bank, except you have to give Dario time to promote. And which I love that aspect. He's like, I'm a promoter. I want to promote my matches. It's like he wants to make money. I get you, Dario. I see what you're doing. But you also have to defend this title if the opportunity comes up to defend it. So this will be fascinating. I don't know what to expect going forward from this.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of the match itself for the Gift of the Gods Championship, where each person has a different part of the belt or a different medallion that goes into it, I always thought was super cool. I likened it to, I'm not as familiar with WWC Masters, but it reminded me of like Power Rangers, where you get the power coin that goes into your morpher. That was kind of what that reminded me of the first time I watched it. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. It's like each one person brings a different aspect of like a champion. So to be able to make this belt, you have to have all of these different traits, and to be the person to hold the belt, you have to prove that you're worthy and that you encompass all of them. So that was like, when I first watched it, that was kind of what was going on in my head for that whole thing. Definitely get some fan favorites in there with Big Rick and Sexy Star. You have Felix, who is kind of the man of 1,000 lives, like Mil Muertes is the man of 1,000 deaths. Being not quite the underdog, but also not quite the favorite. He's in a very interesting position, and I think that makes storytelling around him both incredibly fascinating and also slightly difficult. He himself, and especially now, is just a spectacular performer, and getting to watch him do anything in the ring is always a fun time. But the narratives that they've had as far as why his character is important and the things that they've had him do and the people they've had him interact with, I think have worked really well to bring him towards this match. Like you said, Jack Evans, we haven't gotten to see as much of in Lucha Underground yet as maybe we've gotten to see in recent times in other promotions. Bengala, definitely super new, but also, 1, super cool mask, 2, pretty awesome moves. To be able to get into this match for being such a late addition to the season, as it were, I think was pretty cool. King Cuerno, definitely probably the most established bad guy going into this match. Big Rick kind of don't totally know where his loyalties lie, unless it's about money, then he can get paid off. But yeah, just I'm always a sucker for multi-man matches because I think it really allows for some very interesting interactions that you might not get otherwise.
Like I said, I'm kind of very interested to see how this ends up going, like what the final deal is with this championship because they've given us the premise. We'll see how they execute it, because that's where it is. You can have a great idea, but if you poo the bed on execution, then it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
But we also have the legendary Blue Demon Jr. taking on Tejano. And Blue Demon was in the first match of this series. So Blue Demon being in UltimaLucha is awesome. Although it's weird because he's going to be the heel in this match against Tejano. He had run-ins with Chavo Guerrero, and I mean the first match of Lucha Underground was Blue Demon versus Chavo Guerrero, and Chavo even took out Blue Demon, which made Mexico put a bounty on Chavo. And when Tejano came out to challenge Chavo eventually, Blue Demon answered instead because Chavo got into Blue Demon's head to say that, oh, Tejano represents Mexico now. And they've put over Tejano, as having been the youngest and longest reigning AAA Mega Champion, at least up to that point. And again, I don't know much about Lucha Libre, but they've presented him as a big deal, and they've made it a big deal all the way through. And also, they can't seem to decide whether or not he's a face or a heel, because he does a lot of heelish things, but like he gets that babyface reaction. So we'll see what happens. Who really is Mexico?
Yeah. I'm excited for this match. I've mentioned a couple times before. I like Tejano. He was one of the people that I immediately liked upon being sort of a little bit better introduced to him than just reading about AAA matches and getting to see him in action. Blue Demon, like you said, their very beginning of the very first episode. Definitely interesting that he has had such a change in demeanor, considering the fact that we haven't been able to see a whole lot of him. He hasn't been around as much as perhaps other competitors going into UltimaLucha. So to me, I'm definitely left with a lot of questions as to what led him towards this more heelish kind of path. I mean, when we first saw him in the first episode of Lucha Underground, he was pretty solidly kind of the face. Chavo, well, face-ish, but you knew Chavo wasn't going to stay that way. So that was definitely kind of a pretty clear dynamic going in, and now the dynamic to me is pretty unclear. I understand that Tejano is definitely going to be the face of this match and Blue Demon the heel, but how that switch happened, I'm still trying to figure out, because it wasn't just inherently clear to me as maybe other heel turns and face turns were.
Yeah, it's a rare criticism that there just wasn't much clarity when some of this stuff happens. It just seems to be fluid with the situation. But UltimaLucha, what it's really going to be about is Prince Puma defending his Lucha Underground Championship against Mil Muertes. Now, they've set up Prince Puma since the beginning, since episode 1, putting him in the main event to be the star. As Conan had said, he was from that barrio, and he is from, an Aztec tribe of the Puma, I guess. It's the Aztec tribe thing is still kind of weird to me. I'm very curious if we're going to learn more about some of these different tribes, because all we know about right now are the Puma or the Jaguar and the Moth. I believe those are the only two that have been mentioned. I'd have to go take a closer look at notes, but again, they've built him up. He won for the championship against he became the first Lucha Underground champion. He's defended it against King Cuerno. He's defended it against Drago. He's defended it against Hernandez. He's had all these opportunities to really build and establish himself. But at the same time, somebody that they built since was it 2 or 3 is Mil Muertes, his opponent here. And Mil Muertes has always been that ever-looming presence in Lucha Underground. He had a very long-standing feud with Felix. He was, for a while, he was on Jobber Destruction Patrol. He's been played up as a force to be reckoned with. And thanks to some of the backstage vignettes, they are able to truly kind of capture his essence, like really build upon the mystique of this character, build upon his story, build upon Katrina's Rita Repulsa powers. It's very cool. If we remember, like the half season point, I predicted that the title would change, like in the final episode. So who knows? Like I said, they've developed Mil Muertes here to look like, he's an opponent that has a chance. He's not, a Marty the Moth just get thrown in.
Hurt feelings by that Marty the Moth jab. Just you wait. Just you wait. But I will have to agree with you. Since episode 2, like you mentioned, Mil Muertes has been built up to be this unstoppable kind of juggernaut, not just because of his own size and power, but because of the allies that he has with him. His whole Putty Patrol, as you called them, with the Disciples of Death, his relationship with Katrina, that he being the man of 1,000 deaths, it's all really built up to have him be more or less kind of like the big bad of the season, and Prince Puma, likewise from the same episode, has been built up to be the big good. He's done a couple of things where you're sort of like, wow, I didn't think a good guy would do some of that, but I mean, hey, turnabout's fair play. And yeah, he's definitely been built up to be this never say die hero, going in, fighting for his tribe, fighting for the pride of the temple. And he's at every turn kind of more or less done it his way, where he doesn't always go for the underhanded tactic. He doesn't necessarily stop Conan or Hernandez from interfering in the couple times they did, but he tries to follow the right path. And he does it with, in his side, a more father-like figure rather than the sort of seductress of Katrina from Mil Muertes. So the dynamics between them, there are some similarities where they do have a manager that helps them. Neither of them really speak. So that adds, I think, to the mystique of both of these characters, both these performers. And both of them have kind of proven themselves to be almost nigh unstoppable. So it's the age-old immovable object and unstoppable force, which one's going to come on top?
Which one's going to come on top? The title of your sex tape.
Yep.
But yeah, so altogether, you saw we have a lot of matches going to UltimaLucha. It was split over 2 weeks. It was 3 hours, but we're going to do it as one show, and that's going to come to you next time. But till then, Angie, where can they find you?
All right, I am part of two shows based out of Hawaii. The first one, Midcard Mana, with my tag team partner, Sam Killa, the wrestling connoisseur. We do a little bit more of like unboxing videos, prediction videos, reviews. And then the second one is Valley Isle Collective's Ringside. It's a little bit goofier. I haven't recorded with either of them in quite some time. It's been difficult trying to coordinate all of our schedules, and we're all on the same time zone. So if you can imagine how hard that is, you can understand that it's been pretty difficult to coordinate mine's and Felix's time zones because he is 6 hours ahead of me. And you can find me on any social media as Fumiko Mega.
And you can find me here, youtube.com/Frisco Flame. You can find us at any of your podcast app by looking up Underground Lucha Things. You can find our merch by going to Etsy and look up Lucha Underground. I really need to just put up like shirts also. I've finally figured out how to do some extra store things so that it doesn't all have to be on mine. But you know what? Just find us anywhere. Look us up. And for Angie And for myself, peace out, party peoples. We will see you next time with more Underground Lucha Things.
Bang, bang.